Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about credit cards, specifically how many credit cards you should have, as well as covering the questions of can you have too many credit cards and can a lot of credit cards hurt your credit score. So right off the bat, it is important to know that credit cards can boost your credit if you are paying them on time. So there are a number of reasons that you should have credit cards. They offer added security or protection compared to debit cards or other methods of payment. And they do give you rewards, so you can get cash back or rewards points for spending money. For spending money that you would have spent anyways. But it's important to know that you shouldn't spend more than you have, and you should be paying your credit cards on time. So use your credit cards responsibly. And so going back to the original questions of how many credit cards should you have, I'm going to start by answering a different question. Specifically, what's the minimum amount of credit cards that you should have? And keep in mind that I'm not a financial advisor, so this is not financial advice. But in my opinion, the minimum amount of credit cards that you should have is 2. And there are a couple reasons for that. So with 2 credit cards, you can have like a main credit card that's used frequently. But if you lose that or misplace that or it gets stolen, you have a backup credit card. So you don't have to wait for the credit card company to send you a new card after you cancel it. As well as it makes it easier to track rewards with a lower amount. If you have like 100 credit cards and you just randomly are using them all the time, then it's hard to track all the rewards across all of those cards. So having 2 just simplifies it and makes it a lot easier for you. Alright, so then going back to the original question, to answer that better, let's briefly talk about the 5 categories that affect your credit score. And the first category that I want to talk to you about is your credit history, which makes up 35% of your credit score. So basically, that category just encompasses your on-time payments. Just don't miss payments and pay your credit card bills on time. The second category I'll mention is revolving utilization, which makes up about 30% of your credit score. And basically, that's just talking about the amount of credit you're using based off your credit limit every billing cycle. The third category is your length of credit, which makes up about 15% of your credit score. And that's just talking about from when you started your credit. So say, in terms of credit cards, let's say I've owned a certain credit card for 2 years. That means my length of credit is about 2 years. And number 4 is your credit mix, which makes up about 10% of your credit score. So the different types of credits you have on your account. For example, having a credit card is different than having a car or a mortgage payment. So those different types of loans come into consideration in that category for your credit mix. And the 5th category is new credit, which makes up about 10%. So when applying for a credit card or looking at a loan, they're going to be looking at all the different lines of credit that you have taken out recently. And so the way they view that is if you have a more recent loan, obviously it's going to be more risky because you haven't been paying it off as long, don't have that consistent history. So let's say I put a down payment on a home and now I have a huge mortgage. So that loan is fairly new versus if I were to have done that 10 years ago, it looks a lot better. That whole idea of new credit is being taken into consideration for your credit score. So I could go in a lot more detail about those 5 specific categories for your credit score, but we'll leave it at that and go back to the original question of how many credit cards you should have. So if you were paying attention at all, I was going through those categories and you're probably thinking to yourself, which one of those categories is affected according to the number of credit cards that I own? So the only category that's really directly affected based off the amount of credit cards we have is our new credit, which is only 10% of our total credit score. So overall, having 2 or 200 credit cards, it's not going to hurt your credit score that much if you're opening up a ton of credit cards. Generally, that's going to have a pretty low impact. What's more effective is your length of credit history, more so than the number of credit cards that you have. So for example, if I had a credit card from 2 years ago, that's going to play a bigger role than the credit card I just got a week ago. So the length of my oldest credit card is more important than the number of credit cards that I have overall. So going back to the original question, which I haven't really answered yet, is there isn't really a set number of credit cards you should have to unlock the algorithm to the perfect credit score. But I do have one consideration or a piece of advice for you in the amount of credit cards that you should have. And that piece of advice is the more money you spend, the more credit cards you should probably have. For example, let's say I have a crazy amount of credit cards. Let's just say 50. I have 50 credit cards. But let's say I'm only spending $1,000 a year as an extreme example. It's going to be hard to spend that $1,000 across 50 credit cards. But let's say that I'm spending $200,000 a year on a different extreme. It's going to be a lot easier for me to spend money on 50 different credit cards, essentially because I'm spending more. And another thing to consider is the more credit cards you have with heavier spending is going to optimize the rewards for each card. Because a lot of credit cards, after you spend so much a month or a year on that credit card, the exponential growth for your rewards is going to be declining. It's not going to be increasing as quickly. So if you're spending a lot and you have a lot of credit cards, it's going to help optimize rewards overall. The other thing to consider when having a lot of credit cards is that you can be viewed as a riskier borrower. So if you're going to get a loan or you're applying for another credit card, you could be viewed by that loan officer or that person approving that new credit card for you as more of a risk. So it is a lot more likely that you could be denied a credit card if you already have 99 versus if you only have 2 or 3. Or they might approve you but give you a pretty low line of credit, which might not be that big of a deal to you, but instead of, a $20,000 credit limit, they'll maybe give you like a $1,000 credit card limit. So overall, ultimately, it's not a huge deal how many credit cards you have. It's not going to unlock the secret formula to having a perfect credit score. So generally, you can have as many credit cards as you want, but be smart about it. The more you spend, the more credit cards you should probably have. But be smart and don't spend more money than you have. Having a lot of credit cards can also be a big risk for you. So say I have 50 credit cards with a $1,000 credit limit each. That's $50,000 I can spend. And say my bank account only has $500. It can be very risky for me to spend that $50,000 without actually having the money to pay for it. So keep that in mind and make sure you're making smart financial decisions. So remember to pay off your credit cards and don't spend more than you have. So now we're to the final part of the video where I'm going to tell you how many credit cards the average person should have. And that number should be between 3 and 5 credit cards. I think is plenty to optimize rewards and spending for the average American. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Please smash the like button, subscribe. I appreciate it so much. Thank you and have a great rest of your day.